talk a little bit about what makes a comic book's value crash and also what makes a comic book's value spike. We're going to take a look at two specific examples, but before we hop into it, we are over 70% sold out of the amazing, giant, incredible Bright Box of Mystery with the grand prize of Amazing Fantasy 15 and other prizes like X-Men #1 and your chance at the rarest Marvel Ivan Tao variant to date, featuring stunning artwork of Miles Morales, one of my favorites yet, limited to 50 copies, only available through this mystery box. All the details are live now over at brycecomics.com, and while you're there, sign up for the newsletter for your chance to win a free slab each and every month and get first access to new inventory that comes through the shop and new mystery boxes like this one. Use code COLLECT10, that code is always active. So we're going to be talking about, prices of comic books crashing, and some people will argue and say, buy what you love. This is about comic books, it's about enjoying the hobby. Don't worry about timing your buy-in for comic books. You shouldn't treat them like stocks. Just buy what you love and you can't go wrong. And they're not completely wrong. I mean, if you're a collector whose sole purpose is to buy and collect and you're not concerned about the values of comic books or that part of the hobby is not interesting to you, then by all means, collect what you love and don't worry about timing your buy-in. But the thing that gets me is when people pass judgment, in any situation, but also here in the comic book community. If they say, you should collect comics like this, you should, only collect these types of comics, or you should this or that. I think the judgment part is what gets me. To each their own. Live and let live. There are a lot of different ways to collect comic books. There's a lot of different types of comic books to collect. And at the end of the day, you have to decide what method of collecting is best for you. But this channel is about tips on investing and speculating and purchasing and the prices of comic books. And it's just my opinions and my thoughts on, market trends and, my experience with the hobby, because in my experience, collecting comics is very closely related to the value of those comics. Comics has always been a source of revenue for me, even before it was what I did for a career. I'm now a full-time comic book dealer, but even before that, I was, buying and selling and trading comics at a much lower scale so that I could make money to buy comics so that my wife at the time wouldn't bitch at me about all of the packages showing up on the doorsteps. So if some tips on, how to avoid that whole conflict with your significant other sounds helpful to you, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It'll enter you to win a free slab. We always do a monthly giveaway here on the YouTube channel. But to each their own, and don't pass judgment, and take what's helpful to you and leave what's not. So the first example I want to talk about is Star Wars Clone Wars #1, the special edition or the variant edition. This book features the first appearance of Ahsoka Tano, and it was limited to 1,000 copies. Now, that is something that is actually an interesting point to talk about is 1,000 copies a lot or a little? And the answer is, well, it's relative to the demand for that book. If you take probably 98% of any other Dark Horse comic book, 1,000 copies would be a lot of copies. But there was a point in time where this book was nowhere to be found. And there's 1,000 copies of it out there, and it was just nowhere to be found. I had never seen one in the wild, and then a sale came through when one popped up. Somebody let it slip and sold it at auction, and it sold for over $16,000. And I remember thinking, man, that's mind-blowing, but you just couldn't find this book. The only way you could find it, somebody might have like a I don't want to sell it price on eBay where they put it up for like $25,000. And so there was that massive sale, and right after that massive sale, somebody reached out to me and said, I have a copy of this in 9.8. Would you be interested in buying it? I think they were, asking like 12 or 13,000. And at the time I thought, man, this is crazy. I can't believe I actually have the opportunity to buy this ghost of a book. I ended up passing on it because I just felt like it was a little bit too much of a risk. Like I didn't know if I could, replicate that sale or if that was like a one-off. So I ended up passing on it. And then I've never seen the book since. It's never come through my shop in a collection. Nobody reached out to me to sell it. All the way up, we're talking like over the span of like 2 or 3 years. And then fast forward to now, after the show on Disney Plus, has released featuring Ahsoka. She made her debut on the screen, and the FOMO for this book has absolutely died out. This book is a falling knife, as a lot of people say, and the price just keeps going down and down and down. So fast forward to a couple weeks ago, I had 2 copies come through the shop where a friend of mine actually CPR'd them and got bumped 2 copies from 9.6 to 9.8. By the time he did that, the value was sitting, I think, around like $6,000–7,000, and then by the time he got them back from CGC and they arrived at my shop, the price was down to $5,000 and then $4,000, and now the most recent sale is $3,000, and nobody really knows how far down this book could go. And then today, just earlier today, what gave me the inspiration for this video, someone reached out and said, hey, I have 2 copies of Star Wars Clone Wars #1, the variant edition, that I'd like to sell. What offer can you give to me? And I made them an offer based off of the most recent sale. They were very unhappy about that. Needless to say, that, you know, we didn't make a deal, but I wasn't going to make an offer on these books for anything other than based off the most recent sale, because the next one could be $2,500. I mean, who knows really how far down. It'd be actually really interesting to see if this book bounces back, where it levels off. So needless to say, it went from a ghost of a book to now everybody is dumping their copies. And so I want to talk about this phenomenon a little bit, about shows and movies and their influence on the values of comic books. When Ahsoka was rumored and speculated on, that's right around when, you know, also during the comic book market boom, but that's when that $16,000 sale happened. Nobody was willing to sell their copy. They were like, I'm excited about this character. Who knows? The sky's the limit for the value of this book. Let's wait and see what happens to the value of the book. So it was a ghost. It was nowhere to be found. And then when the show actually came out and started to air, we started to see more copies on the market, plus we had the market correction, a lot of different factors to consider here. But then a thing happened, which happens over and over and over again, is after the show, everybody floods the market. They start seeing low sales, they start seeing the price go down, go down, go down, and then they panic and they sell their copy. So that's the big takeaway here. This trend is going to continue, but you're watching this video and you have this information. A lot of you already are way beyond me and know even more than me about comic books. I'm not trying to, you know, postulate here or anything. I'm just saying that this will happen again. There's many people out there that will be unaware of this. This trend will repeat itself, but you don't have to. If you own a book that is super hot, like Ahsoka, and if you plan to sell it at some point, don't wait for the FOMO to be gone. Sell it when it's hot. And it's really hard to do sometimes, because you think the sky's the limit. Who knows how much it's going to be worth? I don't want to sell it for $16,000. What if the next sale is $30,000? And the thing is, it could be $30,000, but $16,000 is a great price. So don't get greedy, you know, just sell it when it's hot, and don't be one of those people that's chasing their tail, trying to dump their copy when the market is crashed and flooded with the books. It's gonna happen again. Now I want to talk about another thing real quick about movies and shows, because there's a little bit of a difference between movies and TV shows or series. Typically with a hot character that comes to a movie, when you see that portrayal on the screen, typically that's when the FOMO dies. No longer are people fearing missing out. They have plenty of opportunities to buy that book, right? It's a one and done. It premieres in one movie and that's it. With TV shows, the appearance of the character is spread out over a series, you know, often like 6 to 8 weeks or however long the show goes on Disney Plus or what have you. So oftentimes with the first couple episodes, the tension builds even more. The FOMO builds even more because they're super good at hooking us into these shows, and the excitement and the FOMO builds throughout the show. And then after the show, inevitably, it goes down. All right, so just keep that in mind with those two trends. And again, if you just buy comics for the love of comics and you're not worried about timing your buy-in, then none of this applies to you. The next example I want to talk about is a book that's very near and dear to my heart, one of my favorite comic books in existence, Amazing Spider-Man 252. This ties for the first appearance of the Black Suit Spidey, and this book has so much going for it. It's a key issue comic. It has fantastic cover art. It's an homage to AF-15. It has a rich history behind it. The original concept art for Black Suit Spidey was drawn by a fan, and I believe his name was Randy Schuler, who sold it to Jim Shooter for $250. And then the original art by Mike Zeck, just of an interior panel of Black Suit Spidey in Secret Wars 8 ended up selling for, I believe it was $3.6 million. So this book has rich history, it has key significance, it has great art, it has a great story, and it's an iconic key that will be around for the rest of time, right? So my favorite version of this book is the newsstand edition because it's not a rare book. I mean, you can find, I'll put the census up on the screen, but I believe it's thousands of copies in 9.8 and tens of thousands total copies on the census. I could be off on that. I'll put it up on the screen, the actual numbers. But the newsstand is definitely way more rare than the direct edition, and that's reflected by how many copies are available on the market. The census doesn't accurately break this out because CGC hasn't always recognized newsstands on the census. But my preferred copy of this has always been the newsstand edition, and I've owned many CGC 9.8 newsstands of this book over the years because that's how I like to collect comics. I like to trade the curve. So I might buy the book when it's low, sell it when it's high, buy it back when it dips, and then sell it again when it goes high, and so on and so on. I mean, I think I've owned like half a dozen copies of this book. That's a way of collecting that works for me. It generates revenue, it generates income, and I know that at any day of the week, I could find this book if I was willing to pay it. And so I don't always have to keep the book in my possession. That's just the way that I like to collect. So when I bought my first copy of this book, I remember paying like $370, and there was a guy on eBay that had dozens and dozens and dozens of copies of this, and every single week he would put up one copy for sale, no reserve auction on eBay. And it would always end somewhere between $300 and $400. And this went on for years. And the price, slowly fluctuated over time. And I remember I got my first copy from him for around, somewhere between $300 and $400. And I remember waiting, there would be one that would end for like $380, and then I was waiting for the one to end for $370. Like I wanted to save that $10 on the book. And fast forward now, I believe it's like $1,200 or $1,300. I'll put it up on the screen for a CGC 9.8 in today's market. But there was a point when it was selling for even much more than that. So lots of ups and downs with this book. But one thing that I noticed, and this is the example that I want to use for what causes a comic book to spike, is that during the comic book market boom, this book was very hard to find in a CGC 9.8 newsstand. It just was nowhere to be found. Nobody was willing to sell this book in the hot market because this book, of all the factors I just mentioned, it's a key issue. And this is a book that every single collector that I know, when they see this book for the first time, they want it. Like, this is a staple book that I believe should be in every single collection. So when the market was booming, nobody was willing to sell this or put it up for auction. They had the I don't want to sell it prices. And that caused when one or two did slip into an auction, that's what caused the price to go up and up and up and up. Supply and demand. People just weren't willing to sell it, but that demand was still there. And that's what causes a book to spike. There's lots of other reasons that cause a book to spike. Maybe leave a note down in the comments if you think of like a major thing that can either cause a book to spike or cause a book to crash. But I think there could be definitely a lesson here in comparing these two books. When you look at the Clone Wars 1, the lesson is when a book's collectability and value is highly dependent upon that character's portrayal on the screen, it's way more risky. I mean, I think we've all caught on to that at this point. And then when you have a book like Amazing Spider-Man 252 that has all of the other things going for it, classic cover, classic art, great story, the collectability and value of that book is going to be a lot more stable. I'll let you draw your own conclusions about comparing these two books. But that Clone Wars 1 variant, it had no business ever being a $16,000 book. And you're not going to see big spikes like that for classic keys. Like, they're not just going to go to places that they don't belong when there isn't this FOMO or hype surrounding it, like from TV shows and movies. So that's all I have for this video, you guys. Don't forget to follow me over on Instagram for trays for grails and other fresh content over there. Follow me on Whatnot. There's a link down in the description for $15 towards your first purchase on Whatnot, and I always have items in the Buy It Now for $15, so you can stop by and pick up a free book. And lastly, we are over 70% sold out of my latest mystery box with grand prizes like AF-15, the first appearance of Spider-Man, or the actual one like that was homaged by ASM252. You have a shot at winning that $19,000 book for a $250 buy-in, plus many other prizes. Thank you as always for sticking with me to the end of the video. We'll catch you in the next one. Bye. So if you would like, some tips and tricks on how to, how do I say it without saying the B word? So if some tips like,